morning. I'm Ann Brennan. This is the ASMM Digital Small Business Connections podcast, and we are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. I wanted to start today a little differently. A lot of times when I'm talking, I will give you guys a confession. I will say, oh, this is something I do in my business, or something crazy about my life, or something crazy about life in general. And instead, today, I thought I would give you my confession ahead of time. This weekend, I was walking. I love podcasts. I always say I am the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, and my goal is to give you something you can walk away with and put to work in your life or your business. This weekend, I had one of those moments myself, kind of a transformative moment. I've talked to you guys about Michael Hyatt. I really like that podcast. I think I've told you that I listened to Tim Ferriss and that I wasn't convinced about Tim Ferriss for the longest time. But this weekend, I listened to who I am going to call my new best friend, Tim Ferriss, because when you're walking around, you're listening to a podcast, they are your new best friend. They are somebody who you're like, oh, goodness gracious, I know them so well. Well, now I have another new best friend, and his name is Hugh Jackman, because Hugh Jackman was on the Tim Ferriss show over the weekend, and he made a confession that I thought was really pretty amazing. And he said how nervous he got before this. He says, yes, I've been on stage and I get, jittery before stage, and I have those pre-show jitters, and I do that before I'm acting in a scene, and I do that before I have if I'm going to be on the Tonight Show. He says, but this was harder for him. He said it was harder because he consumes this type of media. He listens to the Tim Ferriss show on a regular basis and learns from it. And he felt this responsibility to be able to provide something. And I felt like, oh my gosh, Hugh Jackman and I are totally new best friends, because that's exactly how I felt every time I come on the show. Every time I start the show, I think, gosh, am I going to give them something they can really use? Am I going to provide something of real value? So I hope that I do. I hear from some of you telling me that I do. I hope that I do. I'd like to hear from more of you. If I do, please leave us a review. Apple has a great reviewing system. If you leave it over there, that's wonderful. If not, leave a review on Facebook. Tell people what you think on Facebook. Leave it in the comments. Share it with your friends. Do something along those lines to help us see that we're actually doing a good job here. It means a lot to us. We will be streaming live. We always stream live. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. That means you can ask questions. Asking questions is a great way for you to learn. It's also a great way for our guests to be able to show off their expertise. Today, our guest is going to be Allison Williams. She is the creator of the law firm Mentor, and she's going to talk to you about a few things: how to niche your business so that you can scale it, how and why you should make sure you're using that employee manual, systemization, marketing for recurring business, and oh my gosh, hiring successfully. It's so important. So we got a lot to talk about. Let me introduce her. Hi, Allison. How are you?
Hi, Ann. It's so great to see you. And I'm so excited to be here with your wonderful audience.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you came on. This is really great. So tell us a little bit. You've got something you've created called the Law Firm Mentor. Why did you create it?
So as I tell people, Law Firm Mentor is a business coaching service for solo and small law firm attorneys, and we help them to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. And this was born out of my personal experience. I am a lawyer of 18 years, and I created a law firm and very quickly realized that being a good lawyer has nothing to do with being a good business person. They're completely separate and distinct. And after, I can't tell you how many weeks of working more and more and more to try to fit it all in, the lawyering and the business part of it, I realized very quickly that this was not sustainable. And even though I realized it, I kept going because I didn't know what else to do. Right. And after that fortuitous night where I'm driving home and I'm driving faster and faster and faster, trying to get to bed, I was just exhausted. I was ready to just kind of decompress. I remember having the moment where I woke up and I was a 1/4 centimeter away from a guardrail.
Oh my gosh.
And, that was kind of
that had to have been life-changing.
Yeah, this stuff's for the birds, and then stuff was not the word I used, but I will use that today. And, and I realized I can't do this anymore. So I ultimately was going to give up my law firm, but something deep inside me said, I really want this. I want something in me took me out of being someone's employee and into the world of being a business owner. And it was such a high. And I knew that I could create far more value and reach more people and help more lives and change more families if I was the owner. And so
Right.
I decided to keep my business and started working with business coaches to get it under control. And by basically reforming my mindset and strategically orchestrating all the activity that was necessary in the business around my lawyering, I was able to go from $0 to a multi-million-dollar business in 3.5 years.
Oh,
And
that's amazing.
yeah, so from that, I wanted to share that gift with other business owners. I wanted lawyers to be able to understand that you can be about being an exceptional attorney and adding that value and being in this highly regulated profession and also be profitable and enjoy the business and enjoy the environment that you create. So that's what I help
Right.
lawyers to do. I help them to create whatever they desire in their law firms, scalable revenue, of course, and more profit for themselves, but also more time for themselves and a business that they truly enjoy.
Yeah, and I want to talk about. So we're going to go talk about being, creating a niche or a niche. How do you say it?
I say
I,
niche, but I've
niche.
heard niche,
I
I've heard niche,
Well, I like niche because you can say niching down doesn't sound right, but niching down does. And one of the things I find, especially with attorneys, is they're like, I can practice anything. I can do your divorce, and I can defend you in a drunk driving accident, and I'm like, but should you really? Should you really? So let's talk about that. Finding your niche and figuring out how to scale it based on that. So, can you talk a little bit about what you advise people in that area?
Yeah. So, of course, what I tell people is that there are niches, there are riches in those niches, right? So, what you really have to do is you have to think about who are the ideal clients. So, after you've started serving people, a lot of lawyers start out with door law, right? They have, anything that walks through the door, that's what they practice. And they start to serve clients, but there are some clients that connect with them more than others. And it's not just the clients who pay the bills, right? It's the clients who have an issue that they're passionate about. It's the client who has the same mores, the same goals, the same dreams, the same ideology that the lawyer has, so that there's resonance not only in what you're doing, but how you're doing it and why. And once you find that person, I want you to speak to that person. We would refer to that person as your ideal client avatar, knowing their demographics, their psychographics, meaning how they function, and also where you find them, their geographics. You put together an ideal person, right? And you speak to
Right,
that person in everything that you do. And that is really where you should be serving because it's the easiest, right? You don't have to,
right,
it's easier to get out of bed for a person you believe in, a cause you believe in, than something that's drudgery. It also allows you to have a scalable voice. And what I mean by scalable voice is that you can take what you have done for that person, how you have helped that person, and you can speak authentically from the place of what you believe is ultimately a societal goal. And so you can kind of marry the two, i.e., I believe in helping people to wipe away debt that was caused by calamities in life. And I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and I helped John Doe through this horrible time in his life, and we got a great result. So there, you're talking about what it is that you do, but you're also connecting it to a person that you helped. And so you then become an instant expert by virtue of just being who you are and how you are in business. So there's less work involved. There's less productization of it. There's less, I'm a commodity and I have to figure out how everyone else is serving. You can serve who you want to serve, and you can ultimately be the best at that. And then that message will be easier to attract the clients that you ultimately want to help.
absolutely. And you've got a lot of that information right there at your hands, right? It's not like you have to go out and look for it. You can look at the clients you have. You can look at the ones that have been successful, that have you've made a profit from, right? You can figure those things out on your own. I will often say to a client when we're talking, because it's really, when you're niching down, it helps with your marketing. It
Mhm.
really does. So we'll ask people, tell me about your favorite client, right? And as soon as they do, you can really kind of find that niche in there. You're like, that's your specialty.
Yeah.
Once in a while, it's just that the person is so nice, they're not even making money off of them. They're happy to work with them, right? But if you really say, who's your favorite client, most of the time you will find that answer. So,
Yeah.
whoops, that's going to be my dog. Hopefully, he won't do that the whole time. So let's go on to employee manuals, because this is something actually I personally struggle with. We have created it, and it has sat there for 2 years, and I don't think a single person has looked at it. So why is that wrong? Why am I wrong there? And
Yeah.
how do I fix it?
So, one of the things that we are about here at Law Firm Mentor is systems, and everything in your business should run off of a system, whether it is the system of marketing, the system of hiring, the system of money management, the system of sales. Everything in your business needs to have recurring, consistent, predictable outcomes. Again, recurring, predictable, consistent outcomes. And so, one of the ways that you achieve that is through the employee manual. Now, that is not just brain dumping the rules and putting them in a bound, location and handing it out. That is not how I would recommend that you pursue and secure your employee manual. But what you really should have is a systemic way of doing everything in your business. And the people who are doing the job should be participants in creating those systems so that the people who are involved in the work actually understand the work at an intuitive level, can teach and train other people who are doing the work at an intuitive level. And every once in a while, you're going to need to evolve your systems. And if you are growing in particular, you're going to need to evolve those systems. So that means taking a look at periodic reviews of your systems, making sure that they fit the technology and the process and the streaming of activity in your business, because the more you reiterate and refreshen those systems, the greater scalability that you have, so that when things happen like, oh, I don't know, a global pandemic, you're able to look at the systems that you have in your manual and say, this is where we have to pivot our marketing system right away because we have crisis in the market. Or this is where we have to change our hiring structure because we found a loophole that this did not work to get us the best hire in this particular instance. And a lot of times it is the lack of being systematized that causes the most friction for business owners. So it's not that people don't know what to do, right? You have that one reliable legal secretary who's been with you for a decade and she knows everything in and out. But what happens when she gets sick and has to take an extended leave of absence? Or what happens when you have someone on your team who's family planning and they're out of office for maternity leave that could be extended because of a high risk pregnancy or because the person wants to stay at home longer with an infant? All of these regular life occurrences that are reasonably predictable, we don't even think about. We're kind of in today's moment, today's crisis. We don't think ahead. And so I highly recommend that people be thinking about how to get systems into your business. And one of the ways that you do that once you have your systems down is to actually put them in a form that are not just a manual, but a manual that people can use, that's user-friendly, that allows them to do their jobs better so that they're spending their time thinking about the lawyering and the lawyering, the paralegaling, the intellectual activity, as opposed to the name, rank, serial number activity that really should be rote.
This makes total sense to me, and I will tell you why. I had an aha moment. I actually wrote it down at 10:30, at the 10:30 mark of where you were talking. I wrote it down because we talk about websites a lot. We talk about websites and making sure you're in there on a regular basis. And part of that is because sometimes you do something in your business you haven't even paid attention to. So you add a service and you haven't told anybody about it because it's not on your website. Maybe you've told some friends, but maybe they told a friend who then goes to your website and they're like, but I don't see that service, right? And it's a similar idea, what you're talking about here, in that if we don't put it in, if we're not touching it, if it's not a living, breathing document, then we're missing out. So in this, the pandemic was such a great case to think about. My entire team went digital. Went virtual, which it's worked. It has, but we didn't put anything in the manual. And now we're going, well, how do we come back? Do we tell everybody they're coming back? When we did it, we didn't say, we just said we're going virtual. And we didn't say there's going to be a time when we're going to expect you to be in the office. And that makes it hard. So when it's time to come back, they've gotten used to it. And there's a little bit of feedback there or pushback there saying, we kind of like being able to walk the dog at lunchtime, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you because I know a lot of small business owners have had that question of, maybe I could tail out of my lease and save that capital. Like, how do I really want to go back to my traditional brick and mortar, or do I want to have a hybrid? Some employees virtual, some on team, or some rotating in and out. How do you feel about that?
I think we're going to have a hybrid. I think a hybrid is, and I haven't heard many people talk about it that way. I think we need to have people who come in to the office. Sometimes I don't. We were just at a point where we were going to have to expand, and we're in a flex space. So, which means that there's space behind us to move into. We can just knock down the wall, push it back, and add some offices, which is wonderful. But it would have cost me more, and I don't think we have to do that now. I think we can have some sort of hybrid where some people are going to work from home. We're going to expect them to come in certain days, but odd days. I find when you're working hybrid, you don't have the same interruptions. When you're working virtually, you don't have the same interruptions, which means they're more efficient.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people fail to see the real value that comes from looking at your systems, right? And
Right.
seeing whether or not you have a problem with changing things up.
Right. Right. And hold on, Mike. I had a headphone problem. Yeah. So you have, if you don't have that written down, if you don't have a plan, then it's really not great. So we haven't looked in that manual. And actually, the only reason it's on my mind right now is because we're a social media company. So you would think we'd have this. We're adding a social media policy.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
here's the thing. And I love that you said, well, you would think that we would have, but there's a lot of very highly successful companies that don't have a manual and don't have their systems. And, there is something to be said for, yes, the best case scenario, the reasonably reliable, predictable, consistent revenue, behavior, patterns, structure, etc., outcomes in your business. They flow from systems. But we also know that you have to, as an entrepreneur, be nimble. You have to move in the direction of what is hot in your market. You have to be able to adapt. And so part of what I think a lot of people found from COVID is the fact that they had that skill more than they realized. They became an unconscious competent at pivoting, shifting, adapting, and then moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that being said, and we are really good at that in our office. We are exceptionally good at it in our office, especially. So Anastasia helps me run the business. She is my COO, and she and I can decide this morning that we're going to add a new service. And by the afternoon, it'll be on the website. And by tomorrow morning, it will be marketed. Wow. So we are very quick on the draw, sometimes too quick. Actually, this year my new word is intentional, so that I'm a little more intentional before I put things out there. So, but systemization is important. The problem with it is nobody knows where to start. If you've got multiple things you need to systematize, where do you start?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one of the things that I do here at Law Firm Mentor is we have quarterly business retreats on different topics. And one of the topics, the most popular retreat that we've ever sold that our clients consistently come back to time and time again, is called Systematize Your Law Business. And at that retreat, I talk about where to start. And particularly, we talk about starting where there is friction. And friction means that there is something going on in the business that is a pain point right now. Now, for most businesses, there's more than one piece of pain, right? So
Right.
it's not like we have everything dialed in and we have this one little problem over here, right? Because we're in an ecosystem. So if there's pain in marketing, oftentimes there's pain in sales. There's pain in sales, oftentimes there's pain with people. So you have to think about where friction is from a bottom line perspective. So that usually means if you've got friction in a lot of places, you're going to start with your sales, which in a law firm is your intake and your legal consultations. And then you're going to move to your marketing, and then you're going to move to your collections, and then you're going to move to your legal work. That's globally speaking. Now, of course, this is a very iterative process. So whatever's going on in your business, you have to really ask yourself, where is the pain in my business? If I solve this today, am I going to free up time, money, energy, and activity for the people that produce the most in the business? So that typically means you're going to start with the owner, then you're going to move to the attorney, then to the paralegal, and then to other paraprofessional team. So there's lots of different ways to look at it. But one of the things that is almost universal is if you just start with what's on your desk, you're almost never going to be solving a big enough problem to get traction in the business. So a lot of times people just they need that dopamine hit of, I've got 15 things on my desk and I just want to knock them out. So I have that feeling of moving forward, but it's often busy work that you are getting that dopamine hit from. You're not actually moving the business forward. Sometimes the biggest way to move the business forward is to get into silence and to get into structured, deep work time that you're solving a bigger problem that may require some inter-office meetings, some strategy sessions. It may not be snap, 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 get it off my desk. So you have to think about that, but it usually is, again, guided by where the most friction is in the business.
So I have to tell you, my new best friend, Hugh Jackman, kind of said the same thing this weekend. He talked about the fact that we know what these things are in our lives. We have to trust kind of where we think, but often we don't want to face them. So it really truly was an enlightening podcast for me, that as I was listening to this, that I don't trust myself to know that. And instead I go, oh, that's too hard. I think I'm going to wait. I'm going to just do these tasks that are in front of me instead of looking at a bigger picture and saying, I got to solve this big problem. This is a problem and I got to solve this problem. And until that happens, all these little tasks are just taking my mind away from what's truly important. So I love that you said, what is that big thing? What is that big thing that if you solve that, actually, that's my book right now that I'm reading, The One Thing. What is the one thing that if you solve this, it's going to solve so many other problems for yourself? So.
Yeah, lots of business owners have that issue, right? We kind of, especially because entrepreneurs tend to be driven by the getting stuff done mindset. And getting stuff done is definitely necessary, but the real shift that you make from being an entrepreneur to being a business owner is not just getting stuff done, but who is going to get stuff done. So instead of the what, it's about the who. Is the stuff going to be done by me, or is the stuff going to be done by someone else? And the instinct is me, almost classically with lawyers, but it really almost invariably you make more and you produce more time and money when it's done through someone else.
Absolutely. It was, I tell this all the time on the show. I hired Anastasia, who is my COO. I hired her because my dishwasher was leaking just in this room over here, and I could see it leaking across my floor. This was when I still worked at home. Or when I worked at home before. And I hired her for that. And then I slowly started giving her the business to do. And then I realized, oh my God, I have this miracle here I've created. And we'll talk about hiring in a minute and how I have found the secret to hiring. That doesn't really work, but I just got lucky. But giving her, we grew within months. We doubled our business because I was able to give her all those busy tasks that I was doing. It makes a world of difference.
I had a similar situation, actually. My former office administrator, when I hired her, we were on track to be $1 million business that year. So the first 6 months of the year, we generated $500,000. And then in the second half of the year, after I added her to the team, we generated $1 million. We literally doubled the revenue and the run rate for the business just by adding that one key player who was able to not just take things off of my plate, but to give us strategic space of how are we going to now step up to a new level and how are we going to elevate everyone in the business to that level.
Right. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And it's so hard to see when you're down there, when you're in the weeds. It's so hard to see. If you can take a breath, realize I have to hire somebody. And not only do I have to hire them, but I have to trust them.
You said the T word.
I know, right?
T word is probably one of the worst things for my profession. We don't like to trust people. No. It's all on my shoulders. I'll keep it all.
Exactly. But I think it is a natural tendency of an entrepreneur not to. They're like, this is my baby. You're not going to go hand your baby to just anybody. And so it is very hard to think that they're going to treat it as well as you do. And I'll go back to why I am so lucky with Anastasia in just a minute. But let's talk about that. This is one that I'm interested in. Marketing for consistent recurring revenue. It's something people don't think about. I watch other businesses and I wonder, we are really lucky. I fell into our pricing scheme and how it works. And so I do have that consistent recurring revenue. But when you're talking about attorneys, how do you do that? How do you market for consistent recurring revenue?
Yeah, so it really applies for any business owner. Really, it's all about the plan. Right. So when you're creating a marketing plan, what I always tell people is when we hear marketing plan or business plan, our eyes glaze over. We think there's going to be 15,000 spreadsheets. We think it's going to be very complex. It does not need to be complex at all. And in one of our signature retreats, Marketing for the Masters, we actually walk you through how to create marketing funnels, and a series of marketing funnels produces your plan. So ultimately, you need to know what type of activity you're going to do, right? So you need to have a funnel for each type of activity. And then within that activity, you need to start applying some hypotheses. So, how many eyes are we going to get in front of? Those are your impressions. How many of those impressions are actual leads for our business? So, how many of the people who see our messaging are actually in the market for what we do? There's an estimate,
Mm-hmm.
I think I read somewhere, 3 to 5% of people who actually see your message are in the market for what you sell right now. So, you have to have a lot of reach. But once you get that lot of reach, then you have to determine of those leads, how many of them are viable, right? So not
Right.
just who's calling your office that wants you, but who of those people that want you do you also want? And
Right.
then once you have your viable leads, then the second part of your funnel is really the sales part of it, which is your intake system. How many of those people are going to get scheduled for appointments? How many of those scheduled appointments are going to show up? And then ultimately, how many of them are going to convert into paying clients? And you need to be looking at those 6 steps for each funnel that you have. How many people see the message? Those are your impressions. How many of those people are leads? How many of them are viable that you want to work with? How many get scheduled? How many show up? And how many convert? And when you ask those questions for every type of marketing activity, you have a funnel for your website, you have a
Right.
funnel for your speaking engagements, you have a funnel for your networking, you have a funnel for your billboards. Everything that you do in the world of marketing starts with the impressions and dials down to the number of clients. And if you don't have those numbers purely tracked, then you're going to have to start making some hypotheses. And what I usually tell lawyers to do is go into your database and look at your existing client roster right now and find out where those clients came from, right? Did they come from a
Right.
personal referral? Did they come from a previous client referred someone? Did they come from Google? Did they come from your website? And once you have those numbers, you can start to reverse engineer your numbers from the number of clients that you want in each of your funnels all the way up to the number of people that need to see a message that drove those clients into your business. That's the quick and dirty, a very abbreviated version of a marketing plan. But you
Right.
create the plan and then you work the plan, right? So if I got to get
Right.
a certain number of people in a certain location, then I got to plan out at the beginning of the year, how many speaking engagements do I need to have enough people, and how many people have to be at that engagement to have enough people to see my message, hear my message, so that I have a certain number of impressions that will generate leads that are viable, that will be scheduled, that will show up, and that will become my clients.
Right. Right. That's awesome. And actually, I did it again. I wrote down. I don't usually write down 2 different timestamps in an episode, but I did because what you just told me is something that we are working on. Where are you, Allison? Where are you located?
So I'm physically in the state of New Jersey. That's where my law firm is, and that's where I live. And my coaching
Okay.
clients are all over the country.
Okay, so I'm in Maryland, and I'm in Anne Arundel County, and
Oh.
Anne Arundel County has to be the best county in the world to be a business owner. I mean, if there is one, if there's another one, tell me. I want to know about it because they gave grants during COVID that were phenomenal. They gave several of them, but one of the ones was thing. It was grants for things you could do to build your business this year. Even though we were in the middle of a pandemic, how can you actually build your business instead of not, instead of just treading water, right? And we said, well, we think that having a CRM, but not just a CRM, specific CRM that's just for us and what we do would be helpful. So they said, sure. And they gave us the money to create it. And it allows us to do all of those things in a way that you just said that make a huge difference for us.
Mhm.
And it's something people don't think about how important that CRM is and tracking where your business is coming from and how you built it.
Yeah.
So I think it's what you just said is so important. So we did do a conversation with oh my gosh, Michael Carico in probably May of last year, and he talked specifically about your CRM and why it's going to help you build your business. So we'll put a link back to that episode here as well. So that was really, really helpful what you just said, and it's so important that it's not just a magic that you put out into the world and hope it comes back to you. It's a system you create. It is a plan you create for that consistent recurring revenue.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. That was great. All right, I want to tell you how I hired Anastasia, and then you can tell me how people hire in the real world. And I'm going to tell you how I hired the other two. There's only four of us. There were five of us, but one has left because they're getting his master's. He's getting his master's degree. But my first hire, I'll tell you all of them because you'll get a kick out of it. My first hire happened because I was really crazy one day, and I had about 20,000 appointments, and I'm running into one of them at a Starbucks, and Anastasia sees me coming, and she and her daughter and my son were in school together. We didn't know each other well, but we knew each other well enough for her to do this, which is to say, Anne, I need a volunteer for the middle school dance. And I said, literally both hands in front of me, no, 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 no. I need an assistant. I don't even have time to breathe. And she says, I want a job. So I said, okay. Hired. I mean, literally.
Yeah, that would not be what I recommend. Not at all.
No, it was a horrible way to hire. But I got lucky because she grew up as an entrepreneur's child. So she grew up running fish and chips shops with her parents. Second hire, Anastasia and I were sitting right before an audition for our children. They were auditioning for a jazz band, and another mom was sitting across from us, and Anastasia and I are talking business, and the other mom goes, what do you do? And we told her, she's like, oh my God, that's so interesting. And we're like, yeah. And actually, we're really busy right now. And we're like, and we've been looking for an assistant. And she's like, I want a job. And we said, awesome, hired. And she came in and has been phenomenal. She's very detail oriented, very opposite of what Anastasia and I are. We're the big thinkers. We're always big thinkers and big planners, and we get it done quickly. She's the one who says, is that a good idea? And can we make it better? Right? So she's perfect. And then our second hire actually was my son. And Anastasia hired him when I was not around. And he was 22 at the time. I would have never hired the child in my life. But he ended up being a great hire as well. But our final hire, our most recent hire, was somebody I used to work with in a shoe store years ago. I was doing their marketing. She was working in the shoe store. And I knew I wanted to hire her before I had a company. I was like, if I ever have a company, I'm hiring you. And so she came to me and said, remember when you said that to me? So I do have a good knack for picking good people, but it's not necessarily the way you should hire. So tell us how you really should go about it, because we actually do need an assistant right now.
So let me just say that I think it's great that you trust your instincts, and that's always something that I do tell entrepreneurs that they should build into the process, right? So hiring is not just a data-driven activity. You're going to work closely with the person on some level if you're in a small business. The thing that really differentiates the legal profession from other businesses is that we're so highly regulated that the stakes are very high, that if we make a mistake and we entrusted someone in our business and did not properly supervise them, properly manage them, properly lead them, you're ultimately going to have not just economic loss, but you could have loss of license. You could have any number of other foibles in your business. So there are several things that you can do to design a system that is statistically more likely to get you good people and to keep your license and to keep you humming along in business. So the first thing I always recommend is that you do a screen of the person, that when you get to the point of the resume, right, when you have the right people responding to the right ad, and writing a job ad can be like its own show. But when you get those right people in and you ultimately want to interview them, don't take your time and their time having them physically come into your office, or now because of quarantine, appear by Zoom. Just get them quickly on the phone. You want to ask 4 questions, and those 4 questions are very simply, why did you apply? Okay. What is it that is your big picture goal? And you can put that on a time frame. So it could be 5 years, could be 10 years. You want to know if somebody's looking for a career, if somebody is looking to come get experience and leave, if somebody is looking to be a fixture. And if so, what is it that connects your business to their personal goal? Then you want to ask 2 very specific questions, but each of these questions are going to tail into more detailed questions. So first, what is your greatest strength as a fill in the blank? Lawyer, paralegal, legal assistant, doesn't matter. Marketing assistant, ombudsman, office manager, whomever that person is, whatever role you're hiring for, what is your greatest strength as a fill in the blank? That person is probably going to give you some great puffery, some wonderful accolades, some great adjectives they pulled off the internet. And they're going to say, I am great at such and such. You don't want to just take their word for it. You want to ask for behavioral examples of how that showed up in their business, or so they say. So if somebody said, my greatest strength is that I'm super organized and I keep things meticulously detailed in a business, then you want to say, okay, great. Can you give me an example of a time when your strategic strength of being super organized, had a positive outcome on a business that would not have happened but for your strength? Okay.
Right.
Very important that you phrase it that way. It needs to be not just what is the strength, but where did the strength show up in business, and how was the strength the cause of a positive outcome? So in other
Right.
words, what you're really asking for here is you're asking a person to demonstrate to you that they don't just have a strength, but that strength is something that is so powerful that it was the sine qua non of a positive outcome, that without them there would be something completely different, right? They are at cause
Right.
because of their strength. Same thing with weaknesses, only you want to flip it. So you want to ask them, what is your greatest weakness? Now here, you're looking for a few things. You're looking for a level of introspection and a willingness to be candid about one's faults. And a lot of people have resistance around that. Like, no one wants to
Right.
say, I am like awful with getting to work on time, because they immediately believe that that's going to exclude them. So you want to be listening here for whether or not a person's going to give what I refer to as the BS weakness, right?
Right.
My weakness is I care so much about my clients. Or my weakness is I'm so devoted that sometimes I don't like to go home on the weekends. Or my weakness is I give 1,000% and don't even ask for a raise, right? When somebody
Right.
gives you a weakness that clearly doesn't sound like a weakness, that most people could clearly see as a strength, you want to challenge that, okay?
Right.
So give them examples of weaknesses. Give them a weakness such as something that almost cost a client a case, or something that caused friction in an office, or an interpersonal issue. And you want to be free in giving them examples so that you invite them to see how you're looking at weaknesses, and to feel free that if they share that with you, that you're more likely to, cut them grace, because you're going to ask them, what is the weakness and what have you done to work around it? Okay. So
Right.
after they tell you the weakness and what they've done to work around it, you then want to ask for examples. Give me an example of a circumstance when, but for your weakness, the negative outcome either would have been avoided, or the potential negative outcome could have been avoided. So that, again, requires a level of thought that shows that if that person truly knows themselves and truly knows what they're capable of or not capable of, that they're going to be able to self-correct. Because a person who lacks introspection is less likely to be coachable. They're less likely to be candid if they make mistakes in the business, so that those mistakes can be rectified before there's a real harm to a client. So you want to be very careful to make sure that you get those answers. And once you get those answers, that should tell you whether you're going to move forward in the process.
Right. I love that. And I love, so a couple of things that I think are really big takeaways here. And one is that as a small business owner, your self-awareness is really important.
Mm.
And the people around you must also be self-aware. And those two questions are really good questions, because if someone's not self-aware, it's much harder to coach them inside your business.
Yeah.
If they don't know what their strengths and weaknesses truly are, then it's really hard to coach them to the right outcome.
Yeah. And it's
So,
really challenging, I think, because a lot of us, especially in the legal market, we lawyers are trained to look for problems, right? You don't
right,
come to us usually when everything's hunky-dory. Every once in a while, somebody needs an adoption attorney, or, they're buying a piece of real estate that they're not emotionally invested in. But for most times, people are encountering lawyers when they're in some form of distress.
right,
So for us, we are always looking for risk mitigation, problem solving, and avoiding problems, which means
right,
we're looking for the negative side of things so that we can prevent that having a negative outcome for our client. And so we look at negative when we see everything, which means we see the negative of there's not enough people in the job market, or the job market doesn't produce the type of client or the type of employee that I want. And since our mind goes there, the difficulty we have is that when we see anything that looks positive in a person, we're like, oh, thank God, I need somebody who can read and write and speak English. This person reads, writes, and speaks English. They're great, right? And
Right.
we don't go the full distance of saying, what is it that I need this person to do, right? So, what is their aptitude? What is their attitude, right? Do they want to be in a big cultural environment where they're engaged with people? Are they more of a recluse and they want to work on their own? Like, how do they approach work, and how does that work with our office? And then third, and most importantly, how are they a fit for us, right? Some
Right.
cultures are, kind of bro code. We're walking around, we're cursing, we're very friendly with each other, we're hanging out on the weekends. Others are very corporate and very buttoned down, right? We're in tight suits,
Right.
and we come to work, we go into our office, we work, and we go home. And whatever your culture is, it is yours to define as the business owner. But don't just look to add somebody who happens to have what you need on a resume. You have to think about how that person is going to fit within the ecosystem of your business to make it better. And if they don't fit and or they don't make it better, they don't belong.
It's funny because we have a question that it's a question that will throw people, but it is a question that has helped us not hire somebody who could really not fit in our office. We have a transgender person in our office,
Mm-hmm.
and we always ask a question around that. What are your thoughts on transgender? What are your thoughts on pronouns? And
I love that, by the way.
once in a while, it's important because to us, we don't want to bring somebody in who would ever hurt this person,
Right.
and it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be okay with us. So, and it's not fair to them either. If they have a belief that says this is not a place I'd be comfortable with, well, then we shouldn't bring them in. We
I
want to be
agree.
open and honest. But it's surprising how free people are to tell you what their true opinion is on that. And it's good that you ask. It's important that you ask. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
unfortunately, I think it's sad that there are some what I would refer to as isms that are now so well entrenched into the psyche of our society that we would not share, that we felt uncomfortable. And
Right.
unfortunately, gay, lesbian, transgender rights have not evolved far enough, in my opinion, that we are at the point of saying, that it's not okay to have negative beliefs and to have discriminatory animus toward people in that community. But there are many people that would just gladly say, well, my faith tells me, or my parents told me, etc. And you don't want those people in your environment. And it's great
No,
that
it's
you know that, and that you're like saying, you're not welcome here if that's your belief because you don't fit with us.
right. Right. Yeah, and we don't, we're not going to judge you based on on your religion. That's not the case at all. It's a how would you work with somebody in this condition? Would you work with them? Would it be something that would make you completely uncomfortable? And if so, I don't have time to teach you how to not be that way.
Right.
You know,
And I
and
don't want
and
to take that risk in my culture, right? Because
right.
everyone fits. And as soon as you put someone into the culture, you're reforming the culture slightly, right? So the goal is
Exactly.
to reform it in the positive direction, i.e., we add a person who broadens our ability to connect with each other, who adds to the positive that's in our environment. And if you're not doing that, there's never neutrality, right? People like to think,
Right.
okay, I'm adding somebody and they're just a worker, but there's no such thing, right? Especially in a small business. They're
Right.
going to have ripple effects, whether they're positive or negative, and you want to just balance them out toward the positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's talk a little bit about favorite books because you gave me you said I have so many, but there is one in particular. So tell me about the No BS Ruthless Management of People and Profits.
Yeah, so we've touched on so many topics today, Anne, that I think that this book kind of encapsulates the real focus on just about everything that we talked about. So the No BS series by Dan Kennedy is one of my personal favorites, and this book was recommended to me many, many moons ago, and I still refer back to it, and I still refer my clients to it. And probably the best part of this book, it talks about what I think entrepreneurs are notoriously bad at, which is overestimating the extent to which people are like you. And
Right.
so there is a difference between the entrepreneur's mindset and the employee mindset. And one is not better than the other, they're just different.
They're
And
different.
because we don't accept them as different, we think everyone's going to be like us. And then we have these great letdowns when people are not like us because they have the employee mindset And you can have
Right.
exceptional employees that are just not entrepreneurs. And because they're not thinking like an entrepreneur, you put them down, you feel bad about them, you're frustrated by them. And so the example that was given in this book that I love is that on one day, 100 people walk into a corporation and they're all starting with same level of knowledge, same level of expertise, same ability to do the job. And they start out, and after a year, 5 of them get promoted. And the 5 that get promoted are then middle managers, and upper management says to the middle managers, I want you to manage those other 95. So now you're the one who's responsible for getting outcomes from those 95. And so what do the 5 do? They get together and they say, well, wait a minute. Well, when they ask us what we had to do to get this way, we didn't do anything, right? Nobody had to cheerlead for us. Nobody had to set agendas. So no one had to give us checklists or spreadsheets. We just came to work. We're told generally what to do, and we did the job. So we now feel resentful that we're being told that we have to like be the cheerleaders for these other 95. What's wrong with them that they don't just get it and just
Right.
right? And intellectually, that feels right because we are associating that others are like us, as
Right.
opposed to seeing the beauty and the value of people being different and saying, this person is not like me, but I can optimize their performance for who they are and how they are with certain things that I can build into the communication and the systems and the process that will make them their best selves and make the company successful. And so I love that story because I used to do this notoriously. Like I would
Right.
bring someone in and be like, well, I work every weekend and every morning and every night and and I skip
Right.
holidays. Like what do you mean you don't have the ability to get this done? What do you mean I have to go out and spend money to hire somebody to do this job? You should be able to do this job.
Right.
And that really it doesn't just devalue the person that you are asperging, asparaging, disparaging. I'm just having all
Disparage. I know. It's
all
so
sorts of
hard.
words are
It's
kind of
Monday
thrown
morning.
together. Yeah, it is. It's Monday morning. But the person that you are directing your casting aspersions at, there you go, that you are directing your animus toward can be an exceptional person. But if you're always looking through the entrepreneur's lens, you're almost always going to devalue them because they're not doing you. And so this book talks about that. It gives that perfect example, but it talks a lot about how to optimize people, how to give people reasonable expectations, how to help to coach, train, and elevate them into their best selves, and to know that their best self might be different than you, but it is absolutely necessary. And they have a best self that is something that you can't aspire to, something that you
Right.
can't achieve without them. So it's just a great book in that regard. It really helps you to build a culture that you desire in a
I
business.
love that. Yeah. So and we're running out we are actually out of time, but I do want to ask a question. Do you do any testing? We do the Enneagram test for our crew
Yeah.
before they come in. Do you
Yeah.
do, so which one do you like?
So I love the Real Talent Hiring Assessment. It's by a guy named Jay Henderson. You can find it at realtalenthiring.com. And I don't get any type of honorarium for referring him, but he's brilliant and his company is brilliant and I love it. But that assessment tool we actually use in between the first interview and the last interview that you have. We recommend 3 interviews, so between second and third. And the beauty of the Real Talent Hiring Assessment is that it will tell you stuff that's underneath the hood. So it tells you how a person manages tasks, manages people, and manages themselves. So it'll tell you things like whether a person has a problem with authority, whether the person has low self-esteem, whether the person has a health tension index, meaning when they're stressed, are they more likely to have physical symptoms than not? Like these things you don't think about
Right.
necessarily, but when you think about what we do in the high stress industry of law, you need to know whether or not the person that you're hiring is going to be a bucker of the system who says, I don't want a boss. And that person can
Right.
be effective in your business in certain roles, but certain roles they're highly structured and that person might not be a fit for that. So you have to like really dig underneath, and that tool can be used to help you optimize the second interview so that after you've gotten to the point where, yes, if I had to make a decision today, I would hire this person, that team interview that I recommend is the second interview can then add to the assessment, and you as the final decision maker comes in, you have the assessment, you have the team notes, you have the references, you have everything that you need to make a decision, and you can seal it all together with the right questions that come from that assessment.
That's great. So I've put that on the screen here, but it's realtalenthiring.com. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to look it up. The other thing, and gosh, we're totally out of time. The 5 Love Languages is also a wonderful book and quiz to give the people who work with you. Sounds like something
Hmm.
you do with your spouse. It is great, but it's also really nice to know, does it matter to your employee that you say, hey, that's a really good job? Or would they rather have a bonus?
Wow.
Sometimes you give a person a bonus, they don't really care. But
Hmm.
telling them, oh my God, that was such a great job matters. Or coming and making your tea and making theirs at the same time might be their love language. It might be exactly what they need in that job that you're doing. So that five love language test is huge for that.
Yeah.
So
I hadn't
yeah,
really thought about that, but that really is genius if you think about it,
it's
right? Because
it is
love in that context is not romantic love. It's how you like to see, how you like to experience love, right? And so things like
absolutely
personal touch, I obviously wouldn't go around touching my employees, but
right.
they're, that's not an intimate touch in the love languages sense. So,
Right, exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, it is really, it is very, very powerful, and usually you get the two, right? You find out what the two of them are. So you probably won't touch your employee, but whatever the next one is, you could do that.
right.
So, all right, Allison, you stick around. I This has been a real pleasure having you on the show. I want to make sure everybody knows how to find you. Hold on, Allison, where is it? It's the Law Firm Mentor, lawfirmmentor.net. That's how they find you. Are you on social media as well?
Yeah, I'm all over social media, and I also have a podcast, the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, and we're on all of the major outlets, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. So you can find us just about everywhere. Just Google Law Firm Mentor, and we'll pop up.
That sounds perfect. All right, you stick around. I'm going to tell everybody what's up next week and remind them of a few things. So I'll see you in just 1 second. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This was a long one, but Allison was so full of information, and I love that you can take something in one industry and put it into yours. I think she gave us something that we can use in every industry. So I hope that you guys will take some of this, put it to work, and then come back and tell us what you learned. What was the thing that really hit home for you? That really does make a difference to us to know. I also want to tell you that next week we have Mickey Kennedy coming on the show. And I want to remind you that my kids still think I am a nerd because we are not quite at 1,000 subscribers yet. So please do subscribe on our YouTube channel. Please do that. And if you have a chance, leave a comment and share. That'll help us a lot. All right, Allison, I really appreciate you being here. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.